Let's take a look at checking the patient in from the patient encounter. So the first step is to navigate to the patient encounter. There are several ways to do this, but I'll go to the patient's chart, go to schedule, and click on the particular encounter in question. And then the next step is to select check-in off the action menu. When I check in the patient, if you notice, the charge is created for the particular service that is set up for the encounter. So the clinical intake charge is created. The total amount is $280. The patient's responsibility is $25. That was calculated based on the copay that was set up under the insurance setup. And the payer's responsibility is the difference. The next step is to collect the patient's responsibility. So I hit the Collect Payment button. This brings me to the Create Payment page, and this is the patient's responsibility. So I'm going to enter the $25. The system will automatically apply the $25 allocation to that charge that was created on check-in, and then hit Save. And finally, I'll hit Complete Check-in. That will finish the check-in process and send a notification to the provider that the patient has checked in. And that notification can come in the form of an email or text message depending upon the provider's configuration. I have a couple additional actions I can choose from. I can undo the check-in process. So that will delete all of the charges that are associated with this encounter and put the encounter back into a status of scheduled. Let's check in again. Now, instead of collecting the payment, I do also have the option to approve the patient balance if I have the security to do so. And basically this is used in the case where you've decided that the patient is not going to pay their copay during this visit and you'll defer it to sometime in the future. So I can approve the patient balance and then finally complete check-in. Let's take a look at the scenario where the patient checks in themselves via the patient portal. So I'm going to use this encounter that I've currently scheduled. And if you notice, the location of that encounter is telehealth. So that's important. Only encounters of locations of telehealth will be able to be checked in at the patient portal. So let's hop over to the patient portal and see what the patient sees. So I come into the patient portal and I want to check in using the patient portal. So I'll go to the check-in icon. And here's the appointment I just added. It's a telehealth session, so I'll click Start Check-in. So just like the check-in process off the encounter, the Start Check-in process on the patient portal creates the charges on the encounter and calculates the patient responsibility. So the patient balance in this case is $25 because there's a $25 copay set up. I have my credit card already in the system. I'll hit Send Payment. And this will create this will process the credit card and create the payment in the system. But unfortunately, I haven't completed all my tasks yet. So before I can complete the check-in on the portal, all tasks must be complete. So let me go back to my tasks. Looks like I have one that's incomplete. Consent for evaluation. I have not finalized my consent form. So let me go ahead and do that. Okay, so now that's complete. Let me go ahead and check in now. Continue check-in. Okay, so my check-in is complete. And I can begin my telehealth session by clicking Start Meeting. The third way a patient can check in is to use the check-in kiosk, which could be a tablet attached to the front desk that the patient can check in through a self-service capacity. So they could go in and put in their name of the patient, the date of birth, 2010, their PIN, hit Next. Then they can select the appropriate encounter for that day and sign the check-in. Again, just like on the portal on the encounter, the charge will get added to the encounter and calculated based on the insurance setup. $25 is the co-payment, process payment. And we've completed check-in using the check-in kiosk. So now that the patient is checked in, I'm going to go ahead and put on my provider hat and log into the system as the provider, David O. And so the next thing I want to do is I want to find the encounters for today. And there's a couple different ways that I can do that. I can actually go to the provider dashboard and select today's patients. And so let's see, here are the two patients for today, Erica and Jill. I'm going to look for Jill. Okay, I'm going to see her. So that's one way I can find the encounter. Another way I can find today's patients is just to go to the today's patients right off of the main menu. Okay, there's Jill's encounter right there. And the third way that I can find the encounter is to go to the calendar. So here's today's, and there's Jill's encounter. Let's go to the encounter. Now, if the location of the encounter is telehealth, I can start my telehealth session right here off of the action menu by clicking Start Meeting. Now, during the encounter or after the encounter, I'll have to create a note, attach it to the encounter, and sign it. And the way I do that, as I go to the encounter, I'll go to the Documents tab, and I'll click the Add Note button. Now, this will show a list of possible note templates that have been set up and configured for me to use on the encounter. So I'm going to choose a progress note, and then I can fill out the progress note as needed. So treatment plan information. And again, you can create any type of note that you'd like, etc. Save. Now I've saved my note. Let's go back and edit the note. So I'll select it. I can read it at this point. I can edit it. I could add more information to the note. And finally, I'll sign it. Now, after I'm done with my note, I'm not quite done yet. I still have one final thing to do, and that's to go back to the encounter and send that encounter to billing. This is very important. The encounter will not get billed unless it's routed to the billing department, who will create the appropriate claims or invoices. Now, as the provider, I have some analytics on my dashboard to track my encounters and to make sure that I'm sending them off to billing at the appropriate time. And so to view that, I can view my dashboard. And there's two pagelets here that I need to be aware of. The encounters that have not been sent to billing. So these are all my encounters. I may have seen the patient, I may have completed the notes, or I'm in the process of doing that, but I've not routed that encounter to billing. And so those encounters will not get paid until that happens. So be aware of this. You can click on it, and then you can view your encounters, and if necessary, route those folks to billing. The other item on the dashboard is encounters that have not been checked in yet. So, but this has been aged 7 days. So these are encounters that are in the past, and for some reason they haven't completed the process. So they may have fallen through the cracks of the workflow. So make sure you watch this page as well to make sure, again, the workflow for the encounters is flowing to the billing department. Most of the time you'll be attaching notes to encounters. But there are some times when you'll attach notes to the patient. For example, in the case where you have a treatment plan with progress notes, you'll attach the treatment plan to the patient, and you'll attach the progress notes for each encounter. So to attach a patient level note, you navigate to the patient under Documents, and you select Add Note. You can choose a patient level note such as treatment plan, and you can go ahead and fill out the information for the note and save. Now I can attach notes to an encounter, and I can attach notes to a patient. But when I go to the Documents tab on the patient's chart, it will show all the notes that are relevant for this patient. whether they're attached at the patient level or at the encounter level. And you can tell which note is attached to which item by looking at the notes on the patient's chart and looking at the encounter column, and you can see this is blank. So this is a patient note attached to the patient level. This is an encounter note. This is a patient note, etc. So they're all displayed here under the patient. And again, if you want to go navigate to an encounter and go to documents, you'll see just the notes for that particular encounter. Now, once the patient has been successfully checked in, there are 3 different billing workflows that the system will follow automatically depending upon how the services have been configured as well as the patient's billing setup. And those 3 billing workflows are billing claim, billing invoice, and billing none. The billing claim workflow will be used to create claims. The billing invoice workflow will be used to create invoices. And the billing none workflow will be used in those circumstances where the patient is a self-pay patient and responsible for paying all of the charges. So now I'm going to put on my billing admin hat and process all of the encounters that are going through the billing claims workflow. So the first thing I'll do is identify those encounters by navigating to Encounters Console and select all of the encounters that are ready to bill. And these are the encounters where providers have clicked on that button to send to billing, and the encounter is now in a ready to bill status. So as the billing admin, I'll take a look at these and do some final verification that everything looks good. If everything does look good, I will select the encounter and hit the Create Claims button. I can do this for one encounter, I can do this for multiple encounters, and this will create the claims for all the encounters that I select. Once I create those claims, that's really all I have to do, as the system will automatically process all claims in a new status at night and send them out automatically. I can view those claims by going to the Claims Console and selecting New Ready for Exchange. And this is the claim that I just created. So I can look at the details of that claim, the claim charges, etc. Now, I don't have to wait for the system to automatically send those claims out at night. I do have the option to send them out on an ad hoc basis by clicking the Send Claims button. So now that runs the integration, which brings all the claims from Psykdesk and sends them off to the ClaimMD exchange. After a period of time, as those claims get processed by the various payers, ERAs will come back into the system, which detail the amount that were paid as well as any adjustments. So you can view those ERAs that come back by navigating to the ERA console and looking at the New from Exchange view. And so let's see if we can find the one that I had sent out. So here it is. So here's the ERA from Jill Jones. It got paid. The ERA payments have matched to the claims that I've sent out. And so all I have to do at this point is post the ERA. This will create the payment and update the patient's accounting. So let's look at Jill Jones. And you can see that the claim is now marked as paid. A payment was made as a result of posting that ERA. And I can look at that payment if I want. I can navigate back to the ERA, which created the transaction. And that completes the billing claims workflow. So let's take a look at the invoice billing workflow. So I've created this patient, Willie, and under billing setup, the payer that she has been set up for is a invoice payer versus a claims payer. So this is the Federal Defender's Office. We scheduled an encounter with David. David has already created the note and signed it and sent the encounter to billing. So now I'm going to put on my billing admin hat, or the person responsible for sending out invoices, and go to the encounters console. And I'll take a look at the view that says Encounters Ready to Bill Invoices. So just like claims, I'll select that and create invoices. So that will create the invoices for all the encounters that I select. Now I can go and view those invoices by going to the Invoices console and selecting the new invoices. So here's an example of the invoice that I just created. So the next thing I'll do with the invoice is I'll actually print it off. So I'll come here and say print. Then I can either email this or print it out and mail it to the invoice payer to get paid. And then finally, to manage all the invoices that I have outstanding, I'm going to put this invoice into a status of sent and hit save. And now when I come to my invoice console, I can see invoices that are new and invoices that have been sent. And then once I receive payment for that invoice, I can go ahead and put it finally in a status of paid and hit save. And now that invoice is complete. So currently marking the invoice does not actually create the payment to update the patient's accounting. So once you mark the invoice as paid, you'll come back to the patient's chart, select Create Payer Payment, select the payer, select the amount that was paid, update the allocation to the charge, and hit save. So that'll update the patient's accounting by creating the payment, and now the payer balance is 0. So let's take a look at the billing none workflow or self-pay. So Chad currently under billing setup has no insurance. Another scenario may be that they have insurance, but the service is not billable to insurance. Either way, the patient will have to pay for the entire charge. So I've scheduled Chad already with David. I'm going ahead and check in Chad. I'm going to approve the patient balance for now and complete check-in. So now I'm going to log back in as the provider. And I'm going to go find that. There's Chad on my calendar. I'm going to add a note. Sign it. And then the final thing I have to do is mark the provider tasks complete. Yet, even though my provider tasks are complete, there's still a final step in the encounter workflow for a billing none, and that's having to move into a status of paid. So even though all my tasks are complete, we still haven't paid this encounter. So let's go to Chad's homepage. Let's go ahead and create a patient payment. Amount of $294.51. We're going to pay off that encounter. And now if I take a look at that encounter, it is in a status of paid. Workflows are structures that guide the user through a particular process. They provide edit checks, trigger events, determine what actions can be done next, and provide insights into progress. Workflows are made up of steps, which in turn are made up of statuses, actions, and triggers. Each workflow is associated with one item in Psykdesk, such as an encounter, and you can see the details behind each Psykdesk workflow under Config Workflows. So let's take a look at some of the workflow pieces in context. So here's an encounter, which would be the item in the workflow chart. The status would be scheduled. I can see all of the statuses in the workflow on the workflow tab. So these are all the statuses in the check-in workflow, and these are all the statuses in the claim billing workflow. These are the two workflows associated with the encounter, and the actions that I can perform in the workflow are up here in the action menu. So when you check in a patient, you're moving the encounter through the statuses of scheduled, checked in started, patient responsibility paid, and check-in complete. And then once the patient has been checked in, the provider and the billing administrator will move the encounter through the billing workflows. And in the case of the billing claim workflow, they'll move the encounter through the statuses of ready to bill, claim created, payer responsibility paid, and paid. This workflow structure around your processes is useful as it gives you the ability to query off of the statuses to determine where items in the workflow are. So for example, as the billing administrator, I would like to know all the encounters that are ready to have claims created and sent off to be billed. So I can construct a view off of the ready to bill status for the claims workflow and add that view to the encounters console. And so that's the structure behind this view right here, ready to bill claims sent to billing. What that view does is it pulls back all the encounters that are in a status of ready to bill with the claims billing workflow.